Diversity in all respects is healthier. 12, 19-year-olds all out on the back dock together is rarely a good thing. It's true, but equally so, 12, 64-year-olds on the back dock is not a good thing either. The more diversity of perspectives, the more healthy your organization is going to be. So we wrote our mission statement. The answer to the first question for us is, what do we do? And that's in the first line of the mission. We bring people a great experience. When I teach the new staff orientation, it's a 2-hour class. I tell them if they take only one thing away from the class, it's to understand we're only at work for one reason. And that's the first line of our mission, which is on page 3 in your workbook, and that's to bring people a great experience. And I want them to understand that everybody who works in our organization is fully responsible for the quality of the experience they bring to everybody they interact with. Everybody, customer, coworker, vendor, street person, I don't really care. That's their work. I don't care if we're not there to make sandwiches, we're not there to make money, we're not there to bake. We're there to bring everybody a great experience. In the context of the chart, it's like the North Star. When you're having a bad day, you could just remember, all I'm there to do is bring people a great experience. Then, by the way, I ask them in the class, who here has had a bad day at work? I'm going to ask you, who's had a bad day at work? And who's been tired and confused at work? And who's been really overwhelmed at work? Okay, so I teach them that, and I raise my hand every time. Why would I do that? Because it's true. They think it's not true for you, and then they think when they're tired, overwhelmed, and confused, something's wrong. If something's wrong, it's either wrong with you or it's wrong with them. After a while, it gets tired of blaming themselves, so it must be you. I need them to understand the reality of life. Going for greatness is tiring sometimes. It's confusing sometimes. It can be overwhelming. If you're playing in a big game, whatever your sport is, believe me, they're overwhelmed too. They just learn how to breathe and get back out on the field or the court. If you're a great musician and you actually get to Carnegie Hall to play a concert, you're going to be nervous. You should be. Yes, sir.
Off track completely. But
That's okay. I can handle
it. Some of the organic signs in the business that helped you identify the need to establish.
That's a great question, and I'm going to. That's the next thing after we teach this. Okay. So the mission's like the North Star. When you're tired, confused, overwhelmed, we teach them. Just remember, that's your work, is to bring people a great experience. Did we have this when we opened? No. Did we need it when we opened? Not really. Would it have helped? Probably. But I didn't know about it. Okay? Vision. As we define vision, it's when you get to where you're going and things are working really great and you can describe that success with a lot of richly engaging detail. That's your vision. I'll come back to it in a little bit. What happens if you don't have a clear vision of where you're going? You perish. All of the above, okay? So vision is huge for us. It's going to be a big relevant subject for today. At the bottom of the chart, we have 3 bottom lines that we teach. Great food, great service, great finance are all bottom line issues for us. Did we have this when we opened? No. We didn't even think about it. But as we grew, it became much more important to go, well, what are we trying to do every day? How will we know if we're successful? And for us, food and service were bottom line issues just like money. So we wanted to make money, but we also were committed to delivering great product and great service. On the right side, it says systems. As you grow, systems become more important. This will come up again later. Are systems good or bad?
If it duplicates the right things.
Okay. Good systems are good, bad systems are bad. The bigger you grow, the more systems you need. If you're making pottery by yourself, you don't really need a lot of systems. I mean, if you personally are drawn to structure, set them up, but no one else cares. If you have 100 potters in a factory, I don't think you want everybody just showing up whenever they want, making whatever they want, for how long they want to make it and picking their own color. It's probably not going to work real well. So as you grow, systems become more important. Principles I talked about, other words would be ethics or values, and then the culture on the left side. What's the organizational culture? What do you think are some of the elements of an organizational culture? It's not tricky.
Dress code.
Yeah, what you wear. Like, what's it tell you about our culture that I'm dressed like this? Yeah, I like black and it's casual. Okay. What else? What else would be part of a culture? Yep, laid back. Just in general, what might you look at if I sent you in, some of you are coaches, if I sent you in to be a coach or a consultant in a business and I sent you into a business and told you to come back and give me a quick report on their culture, what would you look at?
Fun or not.
If it's,
If you enjoy it.
yeah, if people are having fun is one of the biggest signs of healthy culture. And by the way, fun at the expense of coworkers is a sign of an unhealthy culture. But what we're talking about is fun in a positive way. What else?
What are your values?
Yeah, what are the values and how closely do they live the values? Every company in the country now got some values, any company of size. The problem is what they write and what they do, there's a big gap between the principles and the cultural behavior. If there's a big gap, that tells you a lot about the culture too. The beliefs actually are a big piece of the culture. Learning is a big piece of the culture, and here's a big piece of our culture. Because we teach this in every class, I'll bet you every employee that you go to that's been there more than 2 or 3 weeks could give you a fairly good explanation of this chart. And I'm talking about sandwich makers, bakers, truck drivers, and they all can do this.
So culture and principles, values become intertwined.
Yes.
If you're not living them, then you're not.
Correct.
What's it called?
Well,
Well, I would suggest that a cult is based on unreality, like a flawed sense of reality, and so people go out and make up a mystical reality and they live in that reality. I believe a healthy culture is you want to be part of. And I don't care whether that's whatever, you're an LSU fan or you're part of the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the NAACP, French Club of America, it don't matter. When you believe in the culture that you're part of, then the ethics and the behavior are all drawn tightly together.
so I would presume that quality food, cleanliness,
Yeah,
hard work ethic, those would be your principles.
Yeah.
But your culture would be.
yeah, yes. It's, you know, hello, it's no different. You can go to church and not live any of it. Happens all the time. Okay, so the key is not what you say, it's what you do, to Brent's point. And so if the culture is not aligned with this other stuff, okay, now as we grew, the culture changed. The key elements that y'all have described were there, but I will never live down standing by the sandwich line about 3 weeks in. We'd come out of this bigger company, which I was getting sick of, and I stupidly said to Paul, it's so great being in a business where we don't have to write everything down anymore. You know how you say stuff and like 40 years later your family still makes fun of you? Well, the thing is, we're at that stage with 2, 3 employees, I was correct. It's just when we had 150 employees, this kind of stuff was hugely helpful. If we had spent a lot of time on this with 2 employees, we wouldn't have ever opened. And that's the point of what I want to go through. Is this making sense?
It gives you the freedom to be able to come to Alexandria today and know that everything's still done correctly that time.
Well, there's a few things going wrong, but as to our earlier conversation, I believe in them. I believe in the systems. I believe in the structure. And what Paul taught me early on, which is true, is when you express belief in people, they do better work. If you never leave them alone, they believe you don't trust them. They believe you believe they're not competent. When you believe they're not competent, they start to believe they're not competent.
I find no matter how good your business is, if you don't have an employee standing right in the front line that shows a good appearance and a good personality, it doesn't matter how good your food is or how good your service is.
I agree.
That person is not representing you right, your business is going to fail.
I agree.
Because I've had very, very good employees that don't have personality, and I've left a lot of customers over them. We've had to let them go for weaker employees just because of their personality. It's so important to motivate the people.
Yeah. You're good. You could come up here and teach this. What's your name?
Cindy.
Cindy. What do you do?
Well, we have a convenience store 24/7 and a sign shop.
Yeah.
Video booth.
I love it. I agree with what Cindy said. I believe you can I can assess almost any organization's health by just what Cindy said. The people on the front line in 5 minutes, I could tell you whether the company's running well or not running well. I'm sure there's a few exceptions, but almost always that's what happens.
That's even in an office.
It's everywhere.
You can lose customers to
Yeah.
hospitals and doctors just because
Yep.
you don't have the right
Yep.
people.
I agree, 100%.
They want to have to be, they want to be there.
Yep, I'm with you. Couldn't agree more. Okay, so are you getting the concept here? What works at the beginning doesn't work later. It's not that we should have done this when we opened. We didn't need to do it. But what we need now with 700 employees is completely different than what we needed with 2. Okay, so on page 6, I want to talk to you about this guy named Edgar Schein, S-C-H-E-I-N. I wrote about it in here. At the time, in the mid-90s, I read an article that Edgar Schein wrote. He's in his early 80s now. He's one of the great scholars of business culture. He's probably the first one that was writing about business culture in the mid-90s. And at the time I read that article, I was having a lot of arguments with Paul. We were probably had about 150, 160 employees. We were probably doing about 6 to 7 million in sales. And we were starting to have a lot of arguments, and he kept telling me we were having too many meetings. And I kept thinking, I don't know, but it's just, we got to get this organized. And he's like, I can't stand it. There's too many meetings. It's bureaucracy. It's dragging us down. And I was like, but how are we going to get this stuff worked out if we don't sit down and work on it? And I mean, he and I have generally gotten along well. We've had lots of arguments and disagreements. We share our vision, we share our values, but we come at things from very different perspectives day to day. So it wasn't that unusual we were in disagreement, but I couldn't really figure out what was going on until I read Dr. Schein's article. What Dr. Schein showed me was that what's appropriate at one stage of an organization's life becomes inappropriate and ineffective later. And all of a sudden, what I realized is we were on the cusp of changing stages, and where Paul's mind was at in that particular moment on that was at the second stage, and my mind was already in the third. And I don't mean I'm better, because there's things he was better at than I was, but for whatever reason, he was still here, fighting what needed to happen. And I was frustrated because what needed to happen was not able to happen with what we currently had at that time. Edgar Schein said that in business studies, in organizational studies, they argue all the time over what's the right style of leadership and what's the wrong style of leadership, and all these theorists have all these ideas and they get in big arguments. And he said, but the problem is they're asking the wrong question. The question is not what's the right style of leadership and what's the wrong style, it's what's the appropriate style for the stage at which the organization is at. I said it last night. This would be like, what's the right style of parenting? Who here has kids? Okay, what's the right, you're good at it, what's the right style of parenting? Depends on the kid. What else does it depend on?
Maturity, age.
Maturity and age. What if we just had one universal style? It doesn't work, because here's the deal. What makes you a fabulous parent when your child is 2 will start to become ineffective at 4 or 5, will be fairly ineffective by 7 or 8. By the time they're 13, will be really miserable. At 18, they'll be in a foster home. At 28, they'll lock you up. Because taking a 28-year-old, healthy 28-year-old going, here, honey, have another bite. Come on, honey, 2 more bites, and then you can go out and play, is great when they're 2. But it's not good at 22. So the key is we all learn to adapt our style to the child. The maturity of all 2-year-olds or 12-year-olds is not the same as all other 12 and 2-year-olds. We adapt to the setting, to the ecosystem. It's the same with leadership. The leadership style that Paul and I had when we opened the deli was very clearly out of Edgar Schein's first stage, which was creating. So he has 4 stages, and that's what I'm going to teach over the next hour. Creating, building, being mature or operating in prime, and then changing. Okay? So the leader's role needs to change for each of those, and I want to walk you through on page 8, the first stage. The first stage he calls creating, I call it startup. Who here has been part of a startup? Okay, so you're familiar with this. What do you think some of the key skills of a leader in a startup are?
Patience.
Patience is very big. What else?
Vision.
Vision is big. Working. A little or a lot? A lot. Yeah. It's all you, man, in the startup. It's you. You're the number one energy source. The characteristic of a successful leader at that startup stage, the biggest thing is energy. You can feel it, right? It's tiring after a while. But in the beginning, it's fun. Energy, emotional energy and physical energy. Because you got to, in my opinion, most of the time you got to work a lot of hours and you got to have the emotional resilience to keep going back for more punishment, so to speak. Is this sounding familiar? Okay, other things at that first stage, at a startup stage that you think might be good skills. Okay, time management's kind of always good though, that's universal, but it doesn't hurt.
Be flexible, responsive.
Yeah, flexible and responsive is the other one that's really big. Because here's the deal, if you've been part of a startup, you've probably experienced this. You work for 3 years getting ready to open, you plan it all out, and then on day 7, what you thought would be your biggest seller isn't selling at all, and something you didn't think was going to sell that you just at the last minute sort of casually added to the list becomes your biggest seller, and you're like, what's going on here? So in a startup, you need to be flexible in order to change direction quickly, or you will not be there very long. Intuition. Having a really good intuitive feel for the marketplace, for the customer, for what's going on is very important. Because if you stick with stuff too long at that startup stage and it's not working, you're going to be out of business. All successful startups made a lot of changes in the beginning. It's inevitable. Nothing wrong with it. Is this making sense? So it's just what O'Day said. At the startup, you're it. It's your energy. It's your insight. It was your idea to start the business. The employees didn't call you out of the blue and say, there's 6 of us over in this neighborhood. We were thinking you should start a business. Here's the idea. We'd like to come work for you. Did anybody ever have that happen? No. It doesn't work that way. The way it works is you start. For those of you who started, did you have a vision of the business before you started? Yeah. I would say that you had intuitively had some vision. Did you write it out the way we teach it at Zingerman's? No. Did we write it out the way we teach it at Zingerman's now? No. Is it critical that you write it out at the startup stage? No. Because if there's 4 employees and you, and his vision's right here, and you're talking to them all day, every day, they get it. Would it be helpful to have it? Yeah. But do you need it? No. You can get by because you're present, you're there, it's embodied in your presence. Everything you say and do is directed towards that vision. Does this sound familiar? Okay. One of the natural laws of business from the natural laws essay I wrote is the 9th natural law, which is that success means you get better problems. I used to believe early on that success would mean I'd have gotten rid of all my problems. But then one day it dawned on me as I reflected that no problems would mean I had passed away. And that was not a problem I wanted. So then I realized that success was just getting the problems that you wanted. If you had a vision when you started, and it's all in your head, but you kind of successfully fulfilled that vision, you will start to see signs that it's time to move to the 2nd stage of Edgar Schein's organizational development. What are some of the signs that it's happening? Here's what I would suggest. If you've been in a startup, you'll be familiar with this. You actually have time to breathe. Like you get a day off, you get a weekend off, you get 5 days off. You actually have time to consider somebody's suggestion about what you do next. So for the early days, months, years of a startup, and somebody goes, you should do this, you're like, don't even bring it up, because I don't have the bandwidth. Leave me alone. But as things start to be successful and it starts to settle in and you figured out what sells, you figured out what doesn't sell, you got a couple articles in the press, your sales are fairly solid, you're paying your bills and you're getting paid, which the public doesn't understand, but that's actually a big sign of early success is you actually got a check, as opposed to just giving other people checks. You familiar with that stage? It's kind of a big deal. The public thinks you're getting rich from day one. You're just figuring out how to pay the bills. It's quite a gap. Okay, so when you're the signs of stage 2, you could breathe, things are starting to settle in, you're thinking about what comes next. Okay? The second stage is on page 9, is what he calls building. Most of you are familiar with this. I think that transitioning from the startup stage to the second stage, which is building, is a fairly natural flow. Okay? There's 2 major skills, characteristics of successful leaders at this stage. The biggest one is you start to delegate. You familiar with this? What's delegate mean?
Let somebody actually do their job.
Okay, you guys are ready to go today. Yeah, you let somebody do their job. You assign a particular task that needs to get done. We need to lock up. I'm going to go home. In the beginning, you locked up every day. Now you might leave early because you trust them. You're going to empower them. You're going to let them do their job. So starting to delegate, because in the beginning, you can literally do almost everything in a small business. I mean, you need them to do little bits, but you got your finger on everything. No proposal goes out without you looking at it. No major interaction happens without you making the decision. At the second stage, we kind of got some routines, so I could trust them. We lock up the same every night. I mean, you've been doing it for 6 months. Here's the key. You lock up. Okay? The second thing is, because you're growing, which is a good problem, is that you start to hire people who share your values. Because you need more people. Make sense? So those are, for me, are the 2 biggest things. You delegate, and then you got to have somebody to delegate to. Hiring people who don't share your values never works. So hiring people who share your values, and if it's a particularly skilled position, you're in the trades, you can't just hire somebody who doesn't know how to do carpentry and give them a saw. They got to have the skill too, but sharing the values is critical. What are the challenges at this stage? I would say, just what y'all just outlined. You got to let go a little bit. You can't do everything yourself. So you start to get other people involved. Okay, for us, this probably happened in the mid-'80s. We started hiring managers. When we opened, we didn't have managers, we had us. We started letting them lock up. We got a few things organized. You got a cleaning list, a closing list, nothing super fancy, but checklists are helpful, so we were always about that kind of stuff. People in business can stay in this second stage for a long time. One of my biggest messages for you today is that there's no right stage of these 3 stages or wrong stage, and that you don't have to keep growing. You can choose to stop growing if you want to not grow. There's nothing wrong with that. My point is to make it a mindful decision of where you want to be. Okay? One of the things that happens at this second stage in my experience is that the original vision of the leader, which was intuitively embedded in their head, has been finished. They had this inspiring vision of where you were going to go. Everybody told you all you wouldn't work, you could never do it, you weren't going to succeed. They were all doubters. By this stage, they're all your best friend, and they were behind you from the beginning. That's the good news. The bad news is the vision that you had, which was really inspiring and got you empowered and charged up to go out there and make something great happen, you kind of finished it. It's like midlife. You're 32, you had the kids, you got the house, you got the job, it's kind of going well. It's not like things are bad, but you've lost that drive to greatness. You've lost that drive to read a lot of books, to go study, to go challenge yourself, to do all these other things. It's just sort of in maintain mode. And I think that happens to a lot of people at this second stage. The metaphor we use for vision is cathedral building. I told the story last night, I've told it a million times, I learned it 25 years ago. It's the guy goes to the construction of the Duomo, of the cathedral in Milan in Italy, which is very majestic, so it'd be 600 years ago. He comes to the first guy, he says, "What are you doing?" The guy says, "I'm laying stone." And he comes to the next guy and he says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm building a cathedral." This is why vision is so important. Between those two people, is there any difference in the actual work that they're doing? No, it's exactly the same. But emotionally, what's the difference between those two? Vision. When you have the vision, how does that change your emotional relationship to the work? More commitment. What else? It's more fun. Who here wants to be part of something great? You don't? You do, okay. I would suggest it's good to raise your hand when people ask positive questions that you want to be part of. I'm just saying, because who wants to get $1 million? He's still not raising it. At least he's consistent. Okay, so it raises commitment. It's more fun. It's emotionally rewarding. It helps with your resilience. I'm not a marathon runner. I run every day, but does anybody run marathons? Okay, do you want to stop partway through? All the time. I run every day. I always want to stop. I just keep going. This is one thing I learned in hiring is, although there's other issues at play, is one good thing about hiring runners. No, because almost all runners, they've learned to keep going through the feeling of quitting. They don't bail because you always feel kind of sick partway through. You just keep going anyway. But my point is, so now at the second stage, after you've had some success at the second stage and you no longer have a vision because it was finished, what starts to happen to commitment?
Declines.
It declines. If your commitment and passion has declined, what's going to happen to the energy that you bring to work every day? It declines. And if your energy is declining and you're going to work, what's going to happen to the energy of all the other people? It's going to go down. When you're working with people whose energy is low, like the ones Ode was talking about earlier this morning before he changed his belief, how's that feel? You're working with people with low energy. It's exhausting. So then you're going what Gary said. Man, I used to love coming to work. Remember in the old days we were working like 80, 90 hours a week and it was so much fun? Remember we were here all night getting those orders ready? It was a blast. Now it's all I do all day is run around and clean up after the employees, then they complain. What a drag. This isn't any fun. I'm not even going to ask who said that. But if you bring that energy, even if you don't say those words, you know it's in your energy when you come to work. They're picking up your energy. They just feed off of you and me. So if that's our energy, now they're feeling down and dragging. How's the customer service? Not very good. How's sales going to be when the salesperson's energy isn't good? How are sales? Okay, when the guy or the woman on the line, his energy is bad, how's quality control? So now you're dealing with more complaints. Sales aren't good enough. We can't pay the bills. We got to go to the bank and beg for money. None of these things are fun. It's the opposite of fun. So what happened? There's no vision. You had one, but you've finished it. This is like you built your house, you built the cathedral, it's completed. You got the certificate of occupancy, you're living in it, but the workmen just keep coming. And you keep paying them. And then they argue every day over what to build next because there's no more plans. So they read some articles. They get in an argument. They tell you what their mother-in-law built. This is what happens. It's not fun, it's not inspiring, it's not exciting. Okay? So one thing to be mindful of if you're at this building stage is, do you have a vision of greatness for 5 or 10 years out? that describes what your life as an organization and you within it will be like, let's say in 5 years. Because if you don't, it's a really good thing to do. And I'm not teaching the visioning seminar today, but it's in the books, and you can email me, and I'm happy to help you. Gary's been through it, so he can coach you on it some too. Having a vision of where you're going that's inspiring and strategically sound. Ours for the year 2020 is written out. It's in the back of here. It's about 9 pages long. Vision for us is not a 2-sentence statement. I never understand what those do. Zingerman's will be the leading supplier of specialty foods in southeastern Michigan. Who cares? Exactly my feeling. Major eye roll. What ours talks about is detail with fun stories. It talks about having fun. It talks about learning. It talks about we'll have 12 to 18 businesses all in the Zingerman, all in the Ann Arbor area by 2020. Not 800, not 2. Why? Because we want to know where we're going. When you come to work with us, I want you to know where you're going, because that's the bus you're getting on. If you want to go to Houston and the bus is going to New York, it's not fun. It's a bad feeling. But most employees are just getting on a bus in the hopes it's going to the right place, and then later they're mad. I'd rather just have the destination on the sign. Let's make it easy. You're not a bad person if you want to go in another direction, but here's where we're going. Come with us if you like it. If you don't want to have fun, bad company to work at. You don't want to learn, bad company to work at. You don't want to radically improve our food and service, you're in a bad business. Go. There's lots of other ones. They're never going to try to improve anything. They won't bother you at all. But the point is being clear on where you're going, because it also helps you and I to have high energy. Remember that energy you had when you started? You can recapture it. But if you have no vision, it's just drudgery, man. You're just laying stone. In the beginning, you were building a cathedral. Now you're laying stone. It's not fun. Is this making sense? Okay. If you successfully get through that second stage, you're going to end up going to the third stage. What are some of the signs that you need to go to the third stage? Because this stage is not an intuitive change in leadership. It's a big shock. Here's at the bottom of page 8, before you turn the page, here's some of the signs in hindsight that I would tell you that it's time to move to the third stage. But I want to see, how many people, does anybody here have more than 30 employees? More than 50? Okay, so with under 15 or 20 employees, you probably never get to this third stage, which is not bad. You still need a vision of greatness, but you don't necessarily need to do what I'm telling you, but it can't hurt to understand this. Here's some signs. That argument Paul and I were having, too many meetings, not enough meetings. Here's what I learned. Meetings are neither good nor bad. What's bad is a badly run meeting. What's good is a healthy meeting. There needs to be dialogue. Peter Block is a great business writer. He said that meetings are the family dinner of organizational life. And I know family dinner has this like sort of majestic, magical, positive connotation, but in my family dinner was not fun. No offense to my family, but all I can remember is mostly wanting to get away from the table. So all I'm saying is bad meetings are not fun, they're not healthy. Healthy, well-run meetings, which is different than just showing up for a meeting unprepared, is good. So that argument is a good sign that it's time to go to the next stage. Here's another sign. Sales are up, but profits are going down. You're working harder than ever, but there's less and less left at the bottom. Why does that happen? That happens, in my opinion, because see, in the beginning, everybody's ready to give it up for the cause. You were, and so are your friends that helped you, because you got this inspiring vision, and we're all on board, and let's go do it, man. And your friends are coming in to help you on their day off. Your cousin will do the website for you for free. Later, you need to hire Wayne, because he's actually good at it. But later, everybody gets to a point where they're tired. They want to get paid. And they've been holding off for years, but now they heard that their cousin got a big raise, and they're doing better work than their cousin, and they want a big raise now too. And pretty soon everybody wants more and more and more, and there's nothing left. So sales are going up, profits are going down. It's not fun anymore. What used to be, you used to be excited to go to work, now it's just like, what a drag, man. I got to go sit in 4 meetings. I got to meet with the insurance agent. Is anybody in insurance before I alienate you? I got to go meet with the insurance agent. Then I got to meet with the city. Then I got to meet with the banker. This sucks. Anybody had that feeling? Yeah. It's not why you got into business. But in child raising, this would be like, this is horrible, man. All I wanted to do was hold that nice baby and coo at it and play with it on the floor. It was so great. This sucks. Now I got to get them a car. They want to do their own thing. They don't listen to me. When they were 2, they just stayed on the floor. I could just watch them while I was doing my work. I wish they were 2 again. See, it's not helpful because they're not going to be 2 again. And if you treat them like they're 2, they're going to move out of your house. So either we need to accept, that's why acceptance is important. We either need to accept the stage that we're at, or the good news is with business, you can go back to having a small business. Your 16-year-old is not going to be 2 again. But you do get when the grandchildren come, you could pretend it's a restart. Which, by the way, is part of why we all get along with our grandparents or grandchildren, but the kids and the parents don't get along. It's the second chance. It's a lot easier. You've given up a lot of the stressors. But my point is, acceptance helps you at this stage to go to the 3rd level. Okay? The 3rd level on the next page is a whole new ball game. Okay? My metaphor for this stage, or for all of this, is if you think of basketball, the first stage, which is like a startup, is like pickup basketball. Anybody used to play basketball? Okay. So if you're really good at basketball, you're the star. Pickup basketball. You go out on the playground, there's a couple hoops and a ball, you're it. You want to play, you can't do it on your own. Come on, you guys, let's go. It's all about your energy. It's all about your skill. You play for an hour or 2 or whatever, and then you go home. You feel good, even if it wasn't, you didn't have a great game, it's still mostly about you. You come back the next day, you do it again. It's all about you, not in a bad way. The second stage, which is building, I would suggest is like you get in an intramural league. Oh, we got a schedule. You know, let's get organized, you guys. Let's run a few plays. There's a couple referees. But in the end of the day, it's still about the star players. Because the other people on the team aren't that great. The star player makes it happen. We do have plays, there's a schedule. But if the star player gets pissed, quits, or moves, or goes back to school and doesn't play, it's highly likely that the rest of the players, the team will just collapse. Is this making sense? The 3rd stage, which is on page 10 in your workbook, operating in prime, is what I would consider is more like running a professional sports franchise. There's still a ball. There's still 2 hoops. But all of a sudden you need a director of player personnel, a director of community relations, director of stadium operations, a chief financial officer. They're still playing basketball out there, but it's such a small piece of the work. If the basketball's bad, the franchise is unlikely to be good. Just like if our sandwich is bad, it's not likely we're going to succeed. So the basics are still critical, but there's all this other work. Which is not why, when you picked up the basketball to play a pickup game of basketball, was not what you got into it thinking, one day I hope I'm hiring a vice president of stadium management. Who would think that? It sounds horrible. But at this stage, with 50, 100, 150, 700 people, that's the work. Because if you run a professional sports franchise like a pickup basketball game, how's that going to go? Oh, we're not playing tonight. My cousin invited me over for dinner and I decided to go there instead. You can't do that. 20,000 people are coming. Okay? So again, acceptance of what's going on. At this stage, here's some key things that the leader would need to do. Number 1, Focus on systems. This is under characteristics. What do you need to do? You need to be very good at structure and systems. At stage 1, it didn't matter. At stage 3, it's critical. You'll die. Because you can't make every sandwich in your business no matter what your industry is. So it's not how good you are at calling on the client, it's how good everybody else is at calling on the client. My job is to make a system, a training system, a checklist, a structure that helps you succeed. In the early years, I just do all the work. You just watch me go. Now, I help you succeed so that you're doing great work, and my job is to design the business. Does this make sense? Okay, here's another really big one. At this stage, the leader's work becomes to hire people with expertise. Expertise that we couldn't have afforded and didn't really necessarily need in the early years. So when we opened the deli, do you think we had an HR director? No, it was me and Paul. Do you think we had a chief financial officer? No, it was me and Paul sitting in the basement because there was no computers. Well, if there were computers, but they were a block long. It was me and Paul sitting there with a pencil and a piece of paper and a calculator, because they did have calculators. We were past adding machines, we were up to calculators. After a 14-hour day trying to calculate the Social Security deduction on people's paychecks. Does anybody else remember this? Okay.